Hello, and welcome back to Life Matters, the program where we engage life issues with critical thinking and a biblical worldview. Here is our host, Toni Clarke, Executive Director of Assure Women's Center in Omaha, Nebraska.
Welcome to Life Matters. Today I'm joined by Haile McAnally, who has an incredible testimony of transformation. She grew up in a Christian home, later became pro-choice, had an abortion, and is now a passionate advocate for life. She's even testified before the Nebraska legislature in support of the heartbeat bill. Haile, thank you for joining us here.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Tell us a little bit about your upbringing. What was your family like?
I have a mom, dad, and a brother. They have been married for almost 25 years, which is amazing. Very Christian household. I always like to make a joke. My dad was actually going to go to the priest school when he was more involved with the Catholic Church, and then met my mom. And then, of course, they had my brother and I. So very Christian household. I grew up going to Trinity Christian, now it's Lifegate, here in Omaha. And we've just had a great childhood and upbringing as well. And I'm a lifelong Omahaan.
Okay, good. Yeah. So did you hear pro-life messages growing up, and how did these influence you as a child?
I heard a little bit. I don't think I could quite understand what it meant, though, at the time. And as I'll kind of share more of my testimony, now looking back, hindsight is always 20/20. So if I would have really took the time to understand and listen to those messages, I think that they would have made a greater impact in my life.
So, people sometimes ask me, did I grow up pro-life? And I always talk about, I know my family was pro-life, but we didn't talk about it very much. And so I think that's an area that we could do better as parents for this generation, that we need to talk about pro-life things a little bit better and hopefully help our kids to understand what pro-life really means.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's one of those no politics at the dinner table type of things.
Yeah. So did you consider yourself pro-life as a young girl?
Yeah, absolutely. I got baptized, confirmed in the church. I was extremely involved. So I would consider myself pro-life when I was younger.
Okay.
Yeah.
So where or what point in your teenage years did your perspective on abortion start to shift?
Probably around that 17, 18 timeframe, kind of when you're exploring life, having some more independence, discovering things that maybe you didn't have a conversation with your parents about beforehand. And going throughout those journeys, I think the narrative, you heard it from celebrities and from, politicians at the time, even leaders in our community that were sharing a very pro-choice message. And so I think just hearing that over and over and over again is how that kind of came to be, that I kind of thought that abortion was the only way out if I ever felt I was in that situation.
Yes, it sounds like you were really influenced by media, with so many of our girls and guys these days are heavily influenced by media.
Yep, absolutely.
Was it something gradual, or was there a specific experience or conversation that made you rethink your stance?
I think it was just over time. I think just continually hearing that message. And, I've shared this a couple times. I wish the church had a stronger presence when I was younger. And now I'm very heavily involved in the church, and I understand where I stand in these issues a lot better. But at the time, it was the rise of social media. MySpace, if anybody remembers that, was kind of coming into existence. And so we had a lot more influence, and I don't think the church kind of caught up with that yet.
Yeah.
And so I think, of course, the choices are mine, but the influences I have are very on an uneven keel, I guess you could say.
So you kind of embraced the label pro-choice.
Mm-hmm.
What was it about the label that made you want to claim it?
I think it was the air of freedom that the narrative gave. It was this: you have all this freedom. I'm a very pro-freedom type of person. I think that in certain situations you should have the ultimate choice, and I think we saw that over the last 4 years. However, I think that can get into a gray area sometimes, and I think the messaging is so strong with the pro-choice movement that it sounds like it is freedom. It sounds like it's liberation. It sounds all these things that are so sunshine and rainbows and unicorns, but when you really get to the heart and soul of the issue, that's where you find out it's actually very demonic in a lot of ways, and it steals a lot of things from us as women that we don't quite talk about enough.
Yeah, I hear you. So I'm going to say this. I really appreciate your willingness to share your story. And so can you walk us through what led you up to having an abortion?
Absolutely. So I was in a relationship with a gentleman, and I always said when I was really young that I would be a great mom. I'm the cool mom, not just your average mom. I'm a cool mom. I always knew that was going to be how I was going to be when I became a mother. And so we were dating. We weren't married yet. And I found myself pregnant. And I was very excited, actually. So I gave him a call on the phone, and I said, guess what? This is like such an exciting experience. And he said, well, what are you going to do about it? And hung up the phone. And actually 13 years later now, I've still never talked to him again.
Wow.
And so, of course, I was 19 at the time. All these hormones were rushing through me, you're not in your right mind. And it was scary. It was, how can I do this by myself? And like I had said, if I would have known places like Assure existed, or, I felt more comfortable going to the church, things probably would have taken a different turn. But unfortunately, I found myself at a Planned Parenthood. And I walked into the clinic. Again, I was so scared. And it was very cold and dingy and dark. And they kind of just took my money, took me into a back room where this doctor on a TV screen wasn't even a doctor in person like you and I are. Basically told me what I was going to go through, and I wasn't paying attention. You're just thinking about everything else. Yeah. And so I just consented and said yes. And then they did an ultrasound. But what's really interesting about how they did ultrasounds at the time, I'm not sure if this is how it still worked, is you were almost encouraged not to look at it. You were encouraged to, it's there, but you don't need to identify with it. And so I chose not to. And they gave me one pill at the clinic. I took it in front of the nurse that was overseeing my procedure, I guess you could say, and then one at home. Okay. And when I took it at home, that's kind of when the chaos ensued. And one thing that Planned Parenthood does while you're in the clinic is they promote this message of, we're there for you. We're very pro-woman. If you need anything, we're here. We're a sisterhood. And unfortunately, I found myself laying in my bathtub, hemorrhaging, and it was a very scary time. I was all alone, and I thought that was truly the last day I would see on this earth, which is extremely frightening when just, a couple days before I was so excited about this precious gift that I had been given. And fortunately, one of my friends found me, took me to the emergency room, but I was so weak, I couldn't call, I couldn't do anything. When I tried to call the clinic, nobody was there. And then by the time that I even realized what was truly happening, I couldn't even pick up the phone to call the ER or 911 or anything. And so through that experience, and I'm sure we'll talk about the healing journey of that as well, I realized how very anti-woman, how everything that we've been given by God, this femininity we have, this instinct of motherhood, it can just be depleted so quickly by people who don't even care about you. Yeah. And so through this experience, I'm so glad we have such a gracious God. The redeeming qualities he gives us. Thank you, Jesus. That's all I'm saying. I feel very, very blessed for that. But now I feel like my part of my healing and forgiveness is sharing the story, and hopefully preventing other women from going through that just completely traumatic experience that I had.
Yeah. So you mentioned if you had known a place like Assure existed, or if you felt more comfortable to go to the church, perhaps you would have. Did you feel like abortion was your only option?
Yes. I did. I did. And, I think a lot of that, I felt like if I went to church or if I went to, I would feel condemned almost and not so much compassionate. And I think now, especially just attending the Walk for Life the other week here in Nebraska, we're seeing this change of the narrative that we're talking about post-abortion. We're talking about these things. And I only wish 13 years ago we were so brave to have those conversations, but I'm glad that now we're kind of starting to talk about that, because I think that would be very impactful.
Good. I think that's one of my hot buttons. We just need to talk about life in general, whether it's at church, whether it's at our dinner tables. We just don't talk about it enough. And I'm a little older than you, but I feel like you were living in the same stigma that my generation probably did as well. If you got pregnant, the church wasn't a safe place to go to, because you did feel that condemnation or that pointing fingers type thing. And I feel like it's loosened up a little bit, but I think we still have a long way to go.
I agree.
So when did your feelings or your stance on abortion begin to change? I know you went through your experience. Was it immediately, or was it shortly after, or when did your stance change?
I think they changed a lot sooner than I realized. To be honest with you, I would say almost immediately after that experience, they probably internally changed for me. But being so public and open about it, actually in the heartbeat bill that was brought forth by Senator Albright, LB 66, this is always one of my favorite stories. I felt this tug. I was kind of reading all the online comments that were being submitted because I was working in the legislature at the time. And just hearing these stories and reading these stories of women. And I felt this tug in my soul. And I'm like, that's that gosh dang Holy Spirit. I know it. I can feel it. And he is relentless. So every day I would wake up and it would kind of get a little bit louder, and it was kind of this, you need to share your story.
Yeah.
And when I ran for office, I didn't share my abortion story at all. Actually, I was advised not to because, the Catholics wouldn't like that. And I'm like, actually, no, knowing in hindsight, I think it's the exact opposite. I think there's a lot of compassion toward the issue now. So going back to LB 626, I kept feeling this tug in my soul and I was like, okay, fine, I will address it. And I went up to Senator Albright's office and I said, I can't help but share the story with you. And at the time, about 5 people only knew about my abortion. And I said, I don't know why I need to tell you this, but I feel the Spirit leading me to do this. And I told her my story. She prayed over me. I cried, of course. And she said, I think you need to testify for this bill. So the first time I said anything publicly was on Nebraska Public Media at LB 626, sharing my abortion story in front of senators that I had heard that were very pro-abortion, and I got to look them in the eye and say, the message that you're saying almost took my life. And it was so empowering and so wonderful. And now I'm a fierce advocate for life at every stage.
So is that the first time you felt like you were pro-life?
Yes, I felt like I claimed it almost. And it was very cool and kind of fun.
Life Matters is the program where we engage life issues with critical thinking and a biblical worldview, and it is a ministry of Assure Women's Center. Assure Women's Center is a nationally recognized pro-life pregnancy center based in Omaha, Nebraska. Did you know that you can connect with Life Matters online? You can find all of our previous episodes to review for yourself or share with the people in your life by visiting firststeptolife.com/Life Matters or on Facebook at First Step to Life Omaha. Sharing our episodes and encouraging us with a positive comment is a completely free way that you can help us get the pro-life message out to more people.
So how did you reconcile that shift after having been pro-choice, then going through an abortion with yourself?
A lot of therapy and talking through it, I think was huge for me because sometimes processing your own emotions when you go through something like that can sometimes lead you astray. I think our emotions lie to us every once in a while,
Yeah.
So having someone else to talk to about that and then continuing to kind of open up to people about it very slowly and kind of understanding what led up to that point and then continually praying and asking for forgiveness. I think that was one thing, and really having those conversations with God, because he's very gracious, he's loving, he's so caring, and it just took a weight off to just process in that way in my own personal relationship with Christ. And through that, it gave me the courage to start speaking out about it.
Good. So you said there were about 5 people that knew you had an abortion. Can you tell us, you're not telling names, but what group of people did you tell, or what people knew?
The first person was my dad. And if you ever see your dad cry, it will probably make you cry too. And I remember he said, Haley, I could have had a grandchild. And I know it was out of love. It was not anything malice. I think he was processing it as well. And I told him, and that was one of the hardest things I think I've ever done. And we're all rambunctious teenagers at some point in our life that do just stuff we probably regret now. But that was the hardest one because my dad and I are very, very close. He's very Christian. He's very rooted in his faith. And to hear that, I think, broke his heart a little bit. So we've also been on this journey of forgiveness with that relationship. And then some of my really, really close friends knew about it. And that was it. That was all.
So I think so often young ladies don't feel like they have a place to share or someone to share. And I think going back to what we do here at Assure, we give them a place to come. They get information. It's unbiased. It's the truth. And it also gives them time to process. Hey, because we ask the question, who do you have that supports you if you were to decide to continue your pregnancy? Who do you have that will support you in an abortion? So it allows them time to think about those things instead of just making a quick decision. Because quite often, moms and dads will certainly, you said your dad said he could have had a grandchild. I think sometimes we forget, or patients may forget, that their parents are very likely willing to say, let's have this baby. But they're in such a contentious point that they make a quick decision without even really processing those things.
Yes.
Wow.
And if I may follow up with that, at Planned Parenthood, again, now looking back, how quickly the process happens does not give you time to really think about the decision you're making, which is why at Assure you get that time to really think about it. Yeah. And I think that's very, very important and probably would have changed a lot about my story as well.
Yeah, women are definitely processors, and we just need that time to just process things through. So was it difficult to open up about something so personal? I know you did it the first time. So did it get easier or?
Yes, it has gotten a lot easier. Okay. And I think that's because we're in this time now where we're talking about it. And it's not just a single voice. I think you're seeing these more, there was a hashtag that trended for right after Roe v. Wade was overturned. That was like post-abortion regret. And the stories these women were sharing, and they're finding their courage and their voice to share it. It was just a huge shift in culture. And so now I'm like, wherever somebody wants me to say it, I will share. And if it saves one child, one mom, I will do it.
Good. Did you get a lot of flack, a lot of negative comments after you testified, or did you have more support?
Yes. Yep. Actually, I almost got accosted outside of the hearing room after I testified. We have great state patrol, though, so we love them. And it still kind of goes on. People are like, well, how can you have an abortion and deny a woman that same they use the word courtesy, but we all know that's not what it is. And, I just have to say, I think that we have to learn from other people's mistakes. If history has taught us anything, we're going to repeat it if we don't learn it. Yeah. And so by sharing the downside of abortion, I think that we're actually doing a service to a lot of women that are so pro-choice. So I have no problem being on that side of the argument.
Mm-hmm. I think I already know the answer to this, but how has sharing your story and advocating for life impacted you personally?
Oh my gosh. Well, my soul is happy every day. There's nothing better than doing something for someone that can't repay you. And I think just sharing it and pouring love into someone that's scared. I mean, it was scary. I remember almost like it happened yesterday, the feeling of just overwhelmingness. And so just impacting one life makes my life better. They probably don't know that, and that's not about me. But just knowing you're impacting somebody else's life and they can do nothing for you in return is, I think, almost the point of life in a way. And so I hope that's a huge purpose God has for me in this world, and I will take it every minute of it.
Well, I know women that have suffered, I'm going to say the guilt and shame of abortion for years. And I can certainly see that you have accepted God's forgiveness and you're walking in that freedom. And that's what we want everyone to come to the knowledge of, that I can be forgiven, that there is grace for me, and that I can walk in freedom, because the enemy can't hold that over our heads. And that's so important that we tell people you can be free from the guilt and shame of an abortion, because God is forgiving. He's a loving God. He's gracious, and he wants us to be free.
Absolutely.
Good.
Absolutely.
So what are you doing now to be a voice for life?
I am pretty much at every pro-life function you can bet I will be there, and supporting our local organizations, especially Assure. I think that's so important. And sharing my story wherever I can, if it's on social media, if it's, I actually just am the newly elected chair of Omaha Young Republicans, which has been fantastic. So that's another platform that we get to share the gift of life and empower young people. Because I think that this, the legacy of places like Assure do lie in the young generation. Yeah. And I think we have a real opportunity here as young people to completely shift what's been happening over the last 50 years. And so partnering up with everybody that's wherever they're at in their stage of their pro-life journey, any way I can have an impact on that, I am here for it.
Good. I think it's been said that this generation is one of the most socially aware, and I think it's our responsibility to help them know what area to be aware in.
Yes.
And so if we're not speaking about pro-life issues to them, then they're hearing it, like you said earlier, from the media, and that kind of changes their opinion about life. So we have to be a voice for them as they're making those decisions of what to support or what not to support. So thank you for being a voice.
Yes.
So what do you want women facing unplanned pregnancies to know?
That there is hope.
Okay.
That there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and there's excuse me, the scared feeling or the nervous feeling you have is so temporary compared to the wonderful life that you can have after you have a child. And I think that's one thing that we've done really good at as a pro-life movement is shed hope everywhere we can. And also that there is grace if you do decide abortion. That's the other thing. This post-abortion, yes, it's not the end-all be-all of your life. Right. You have so much more to offer this life. And it can be very heavy because, as I said, I think as women, we are so maternal. We're so feminine. That's in our bones, in our blood. And so it does hit us differently than it would hit, a man in the situation.
Yeah.
And we both will process it at different wavelengths. But at the end of the day, there's hope. I think there's a lot of joy on the other side of it too, because you realize that you can change other lives by changing your story. Or if you do find yourself pregnant, the legacy you can leave on this earth to help build up other people that are going to share the same message and put in positivity and encouragement and inspiration into this world is huge too.
I think you said something very important as well. There's hope for women that have had an abortion. And so I would say if there's a listener if there's a listener that's listening now who has had an abortion, or someone that's had an abortion, they can reach out to Assure. We can make sure that they get the resources that they need to help them overcome that guilt, shame, fear that they've experienced because of the abortion that they had. Because we want people to feel free and be free in the Lord. So if you or someone has had an abortion, please reach out to Assure, and so we can be that resource for you. So how can people listening today make a difference in the pro-life community? Give us some thoughts that you have for people to get involved.
I think anything Assure does is huge. Getting involved in any way, volunteering. I know you talked about your post-abortion classes that you have. I've heard a lot about those. Any way that you can share the message. Because again, my story started because I didn't know resources existed. And so being that voice out in your community on social media, sharing what's going on. And I know around our whole state, our whole country, there's amazing organizations that are really lifting this message up, which is fantastic. So any way you can get involved, or just being a listening ear to somebody. That's the other thing. Being a welcoming ear and someone that is free from judgment. Yeah. Huge. If maybe one of your girlfriends is struggling with this, or maybe a couple that you're friends with is struggling with this, being a non-judgmental listening ear is huge. So those would be my two biggest things.
Good. So what's next for you in your advocacy?
Well, continuing, of course, it's never ending. We're always going to have the fight. Unfortunately, Satan works hard, and that stinks, but that's okay. That means we only are going to work harder. Yeah. And so that's one big thing. Continue what I'm doing, and then also encouraging more young people to be in the fight. Yeah. By using my social media platforms. I'm on pretty much every platform at this point, and hopefully being a bigger voice in Nebraska at some stage.
Okay, good. All right. If you could say one thing to someone who's where you were, considering abortion or struggling after one, what would you tell them?
Don't do it. Give yourself time. Give yourself a moment. Be in the moment. Feel your feelings. I think that's also very important, and they're very valid. But don't rush into any decisions, because there's a lot of voices right now, as we talked about on social media, politicians, celebrities, that are coming your way, and you're going to remember everything you heard. So take time to absorb that, and visit places like Assure that will lead you through that thought process if you can't do it on your own, and go from there. So be slow, be patient with yourself, give yourself grace, and don't make any rash decisions.
Haile, you've been pretty open with your story, sharing your story. And you said you haven't spoken to the father of your baby in 13 years. Do you ever think that maybe he's heard your testimony?
I like to think so. I don't know. I think God works in mysterious ways, but I hope so. And I don't hold any hate in my heart. I don't hold anything against anybody. At the end of the day, I do have to remember that ultimate decision was mine. So I think the healing process was mainly on me. But I hope he does. And I hope that if he is hurting from it, that he's found healing too.
Okay, good. Thank you. So what do you think about the statistics of abortions in the church versus outside the church?
As someone who grew up in the church, I think that we find ourselves in this very curious spot, especially as young women, that the message of the church is purity, it's holiness, it's and sometimes I think that the strict nature that some of the messaging can have leads women to maybe look for an alternate path. Yeah. We were all, again, like I said, rambunctious teenagers, where everything our parents said, we're going to do the exact opposite of that. Yeah. And I think that this probably is a little bit of a manifestation of that in a way, is that we grew up in this very strict culture, which there is nothing wrong with that in the Bible. is God's word. But I think that the church didn't shift with culture and guide young women with the growth of social media and the growth of media and celebrities and all of these things that really influence young women. And so am I surprised that the abortion rates are pretty similar? I'm not. However, I do think the church has a leg up on recovering some of these young women and transforming the message.
Yeah, I heard someone say that abortion is the church's fig leaf when it comes to sexual sin. And what that means is if I've committed a sexual sin and I get pregnant, I'm not going to tell you, I'm going to commit really another sin in order to cover the first sin. So the church addresses that sin really well, but it doesn't really address the sin of abortion. That's a good point. All right. Thank you so much, Haile, for sharing your powerful testimony. Your courage and honesty are making a difference in the fight for life. For anyone listening, if you or someone you know is facing an unplanned pregnancy or struggling with a past abortion, help is available. At Assure Women's Center, we have resources for women facing unplanned pregnancies, as well as our PATH classes, which stands for Post-Abortion Trauma Healing, for women who've already had an abortion, as well as men. If you or someone you know is facing an unplanned pregnancy and needs support, please visit AssureOmaha.com. If you're interested in a PATH class, please email us at lifematters@AssureOmaha.com.
We want to thank you for joining us on Life Matters this week. Life Matters is an educational outreach resource of Assure Women's Center in Omaha, Nebraska. Assure is helping women with unplanned pregnancies take the first step to life. To learn more about the ministry of Assure, visit firststeptolife.com. That's firststeptolife.com. There you can learn about the many services we provide, including how we come alongside abortion-minded mothers and empower women to choose life for her and her baby. You can also find information on our website about how you can partner with us in the life-saving work of Assure. Through your generous support, we can continue to save babies in Nebraska while advancing the cause of life around the world. Thanks for listening to Life Matters. Join us again next week at the same time right here on BOT Radio Network.